Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Lisa Speaker. I'm here today with a star-studded panel of attorneys to talk to us about technology issues, especially now that we're doing a lot of things by Zoom. Everybody knows Scott Bassett, our family law appellate attorney. And Melissa Calais is newer to the Michigan bar, but she's been very active since she moved to Michigan a couple years ago. She's over in Grand Rapids. And she's had a paperless office for a while and did electronic filing in the state of Oregon, before she moved to Michigan. So they were kind of ahead of the curve as far as trial courts. And then we have Don Wheaton from over in, I'm going to say Macomb County. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Oh, good. Okay. And he is on the Family Law Council with me. So welcome, everybody. We have a lot of things to talk about today. I'm not sure that with all the questions that we have, just even with a few people, I think that I'm not sure we're going to get through everything today, but we'll do our very best to cover all the topics. So first, I wanted to see if I could get some help. You know, why are we having this conversation now? Why is technology even more important than ever? And I think Melissa has a couple of comments that she wanted to make, but we're going to start with mentioning the executive order that moved us to remote. Melissa?
Well, obviously we had the executive order that required us to go remote, and now we have a new executive order that says that law offices are no longer closed, but subject to certain conditions. And one of those conditions is that any work that is capable of being performed remotely must be performed remotely. And they do define that as without the worker leaving your home or place of residence. So if you are able to work from home, that means that you're required to work from home even still. And the other thing that I think is important is to remember the rules of professional conduct, specifically Rule 1.1 requires tech competence among other levels of competency that we're required to have. So if the tech is out there to be able to work remotely, I do think that you need to incorporate some of that into your practice at this point.
So that's interesting, Melissa, because isn't that tech competency rule relatively new in Michigan?
It is relatively new in Michigan, and Scott actually provided me a real helpful link that informed me that Michigan was the 37th state to incorporate that. And because I've been licensed in Oregon for much longer than in Michigan, I was curious to see that Oregon has not formally implemented that, but even when I practiced there, that was always my understanding, is that competency is interpreted very broadly, not just to mean the subject matter competency that you're working on, but also tech competency as well.
So when did that go into effect?
It was
I
January
believe
1st of this year. Yeah.
So it's a little bit, I don't know if I'd say ironic, but we have this new rule and attorneys are, oh my gosh, we've got to get up to speed on all this technological issues. And then boom, a couple months later, we're in the middle of a pandemic and now we're all being forced to become technologically competent, but heaven forbid for the people who weren't quite there yet. And probably some people are still struggling. So thank you very much, all of you, for being here today. Now, I know I have some polls I want to do really quickly, and I think it's going to help, especially Scott, who's really our technological guru for the section, for him to have some information. So first, we're going to do some polls, and I know everybody's not here yet, but that's okay. First, it's regarding your experience that you have right now with the technology stuff. Can you see both questions at the same time?
Yeah, both questions.
Oh, interesting. Okay, good. So I wasn't sure how this was going to look. So there's two questions. If you could go ahead and answer about whether your trial court, wherever you are in the state, is using, the main one you go to, I guess, is using e-filing, and about whether you have, oh my gosh, overwhelming now. And I think it's interesting because when I asked the Zoom hearing question probably a month and a half ago, hardly anybody had done one yet. And now we have an overwhelming majority of people who have already been through the process. So interesting. And then going to some technological issues, I'm going to end this poll right now. And did you guys see it now? Can you see it now?
We're seeing the results, right?
Okay, so you couldn't see it until I hit that button. See, I'm still learning. I mean, I've been doing webinars for like 10 weeks now, and I still haven't learned everything. Okay, so let's go to the next poll, because this is really going to help Scott know where. Well, so you have to figure out how to do it. Where's my next poll? Close. I might have to share, Scott, I might have to share, stop share results. Relaunch polling.
That must be it. Relaunch polling.
We'll clear,
think.
exiting, continue. I'm so sorry about this, but no, it's asking the same question. I have 3 polls that I set up. Okay. Well, I might just have to give some control of the thing over to Scott so he can help me out. Let's go really quickly to, is it going to let me share control?
I am not seeing it.
Make a host. I'm making you a host.
Okay.
Okay. Scott, can you figure out how to do the poll? I created 3 polls. One was the experience, what you've had as experience, and then the second one is on technology issues. And those were the real questions that Scott wanted to have answered about
Right.
what kind of computer systems you're using and that sort of thing.
Let's see if we can get the next poll up, although I don't see it here.
While you're doing that, Scott, you can notice that Lisa's got a headset on. I have a headset on. Scott has a headset on. And yesterday or 2 days ago when we were prepping for this, Melissa had a noise canceling headset on, but today she's using her webcam microphone.
Oh yes, Melissa, why don't you tell us about one of the most, so let's just go to the next, oh, here we are. Let's do these questions first. Everybody can answer. Now I get to answer and Scott doesn't.
Right.
Okay. Internal or external?
Okay. So we've got about 2/3, no, more than that now, 90% Windows versus Mac. No, 95% Windows versus Mac. More people are using Wi-Fi than Ethernet right now, and about 40% say it depends on whether they're at home or in the office. And then the issue of internal or external webcam. Most people are using the internal webcams built into their presumably laptops. Not too many desktops have built-in webcams. Okay, and then half the people are using laptops for the bulk of their work. Another almost quarter for when they're at home traveling, and then only about 20% using desktops, although
so can you do the office, press the share the poll button so we can all see it?
Let me find the share button here. Okay, gonna end the polling and share results.
All right. And then we have to scroll down because there's too many questions.
Yes,
interesting. Okay. So interesting. Thank you, Scott, for helping me out there. Well, the next thing we wanted to talk about was Zoom hearings, and one of the top things we wanted to talk about, the first thing we wanted to talk about was sound quality. And you saw that Don already mentioned the headsets. Well, my headset's brand new. Today's the first day I'm using it. And for everybody who's been to these webinars, I'm hoping that you're noticing a difference, that it's better sound quality than it has been. And then before, Melissa had the Mac daddy of all the headsets. Today she doesn't have it, but she did have the best headset of all of us because it had some noise canceling function. Can you tell us, one of the panelists, tell us what kind of headsets are you recommending for people who are, and this is especially important if you're in a hearing where you're having to have a conversation with the judge and your client and so forth. What are you recommending?
You want to start, Melissa, and talk about what you use?
Sure. So it's ironic that today we're talking about tech issues, and I feel like I have had a plethora of tech problems today, starting with the power going out at my house yesterday afternoon when I was in the middle of a Zoom training. And it's been out for 24 hours now. And I was also in the process of moving offices, which has been a challenge in the midst of a pandemic. And the internet was supposed to switch over on June 1st and has not happened. So it was not working at my office. It was not working at my home. So I came to my mom's house. And so I am doing it here. And so I don't have my headset. But typically what I do for all of my Zoom appearances or anything really that I need to have an audio connection is to have a headset. And it, for me, has been one of those game changer kind of things. I use a Sennheiser headset. I went ahead and bought like the Cadillac top of the line sort of model because I had gone through probably 4 or 5 other headsets that did not work and was tired of spending $40 on a headset that didn't work, and just decided to spend a few hundred on one that I thought would work, and was extremely happy with my Sennheiser headset.
Anybody else want to add any comments about headsets?
The one that I'm using, Scott Bassett had recommended buying the one that he's using, the corded to, not it's a USB, not a Bluetooth.
Right.
But when
That's
I
what
went
I
out to buy it at the beginning of the pandemic, none to be found anywhere. Amazon couldn't fulfill the order. Nowhere could I get it. So I ended up upgrading, as it were, to this Sennheiser MB1. They call it one because it's only got one earphone. And that's nice because I can hear what's going on in the background. At the same time, if you want noise canceling, you need both. But this boom mic really does eliminate a lot of feedback, and the sound quality is much better than if I use the webcam that I'm standing in front of.
I think I went with the Scott model because mine is attached to my laptop by USB. It's one-sided, but it's really been fantastic for the whole 8 hours that I've used it.
Yeah, the one I use is the Sennheiser PC08. It's only about $40 on Amazon. I think it's currently in stock. Just to give you a quick demonstration of the difference, I'm going to switch to the microphone built into my webcam, and I'm going to keep talking, and hopefully you can hear a difference in the sound. And hopefully it's pretty dramatic.
It is pretty dramatic,
Okay.
Matt.
So I am going to switch back to my headset.
So now I know what I sounded like for the last webinars.
Exactly, and that's it's kind of a lesson for everybody who is trying to use either the microphone built into an external webcam, and I'm using the Logitech C920, which has dual allegedly noise canceling microphones, but you can hear the difference between an external microphone like that and one that's on a boom that's closer to the mouth. So yeah, keep that in mind when you're doing hearings. A headset is going to greatly improve the audio.
Gail asked about us putting our recommendations of the equipment in the chat, and I think we're going to do one better, Gail, because we're going to be talking about a lot of different recommendations. And I think what I want to do after the webinar is make a quick little list of the takeaways from today and allow my panelists to provide the actual models that they're recommending. So you'll get that in the next few days, and I think it'll have more information than if we just throw it into the chat. So the next question has to do with our internet or Wi-Fi, and as Melissa learned, she thought she had an Ethernet connection at her new office, and she doesn't. I know, Scott, you had some specific comments about Zoom hearings and using Wi-Fi versus Ethernet.
Right. The general rule on any kind of a video conference is going to be to use Wi-Fi. Not to use Wi-Fi, excuse me, to use Ethernet. The reason is that, video is much more demanding than what you typically do with computers. You're pushing a lot more bandwidth through the pipe. And when you're using Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi is kind of inherently unstable. You might think it's great if all you're doing is browsing the web, but on something that requires a constant signal where you don't want the video to drop out or the audio to drop out, then you really do need to use an Ethernet connection, if at all possible. The problem is a lot of us have these new thin and light laptops that don't even have an Ethernet port on them, in which case you need to go out and buy what's called a dongle, also known as a USB to Ethernet adapter. And that plugs into a USB or a USB-C port on your laptop, and then it has an Ethernet port on it where you can plug directly into your router. Now, of course, that means you're going to need to be physically located somewhere near your router, or you're going to have to do what I do. I always keep a 50 or 100-foot Ethernet cable handy in case I have to plug in and I'm not directly at my desk where my router is. The other option is if you have to rely on Wi-Fi, get as close as you can to your Wi-Fi router. Make sure that nobody else in your house is streaming anything, watching TV if you have a smart TV, or doing anything that might be eating through your bandwidth if it's at the home or at the office. So you definitely want to be on Ethernet if possible. If you're stuck with Wi-Fi, make sure nobody else is using it and you're as close as you can be to your router.
Hey, Scott, can you return the host control for me really quickly? And so we also had some suggestions about webcams, and I know I was very fortunate that I had a regular meeting scheduled, and my person that I was meeting with recommended that I get a webcam. This is back in probably December or January. So I've had a webcam since then, which was really good because I got used to having one on my desktop at the office. But I know that there's maybe some specific recommendations for having a good visual with the webcam. Scott, were you able to figure out the hosting?
Trying to get up to get the hosting undone here.
Sorry, I can't do it once I give control to you.
Yes.
Scott, I sent you a message through chat. If you would just take a look at it before you transfer host, you can accomplish the same function. Because this noise in the background is
What's
pointing
that?
out one of the problems that tech gives us. If you don't mute yourself, if you unmute yourself and then you're working in your kitchen, even though you're hiding behind your picture, we're going to hear everything.
Still, yes.
I've got it muted. Okay.
Lesson learned. Thank you. Okay, so webcam. Scott, I think you had some
Yes.
comments yesterday.
The webcams that are built into most laptops are pretty inferior. They're almost an afterthought. There are some exceptions. Melissa uses a Microsoft Surface device, and all of the Surface devices, whether it's a Surface Pro, a Surface laptop, or a Surface Book, have exceptionally good webcams. But generally what you want to do is find a good external webcam. The one that is generally recommended, they use it for podcasting, they use it for video conferencing. I've been using mine for years, are the Logitech HD 920 and 930 series. And the great thing about those is that they have a high definition video. They can be mounted a number of different ways, including on top of a monitor. You can mount them on a standard camera tripod if you have one handy, and you'll get a much clearer picture that way. Now, we mentioned audio before video because audio is clearly the most important part of any kind of a web conference or hearing. So that's where you want to focus your attention most. But if you can, see if you can find a webcam. The problem right now is that finding a quality webcam is next to impossible online. Your only option is probably going to be eBay, and you can find the Logitech C920s on eBay, but they're going to run about twice the normal price. This is typically a $60, $65 webcam. It's going to be going for $140 on eBay these days. The other thing you can do is there are apps where you can use your smartphone as a webcam. Smartphones have excellent cameras, much better than anything you'll find in any laptop. And there's the app that I would recommend is called Droid Cam, Droid for Android, and Cam, C-A-M. Now, and we'll get that out to everybody, the link to that. I should add that even though it says Droid, it also works with iPhones as well. There's an iOS version for it, so don't be put off by the name. And you can either connect your cell phone to your computer by Wi-Fi, which I don't recommend, or you can plug it in via USB cable, and that way you're not eating up the precious parts of your Wi-Fi signal that you need to actually do the conference, just to establish the connection between your cell phone and your computer.
Thank you, Scott. Hey, Dawn, you had some tips for us about how to, tips for making us look good when we're having a Zoom hearing.
Right. You really have to think of theater, because that's what you're staging here. You're staging a presentation. You are on stage for the Zoom. So you have to think of, first of all, where are you positioning that camera? I mean, position it at your eye level or above, if possible, because we don't need you looking down into it. The last thing everybody needs to see is your nose hairs. It has to be stationary too. Don't let it wobble, because I've had a couple judges say that it makes people seasick if the camera is wobbling and your video is moving. You want to rename yourself, if you can, with your case number to help the judge and the judge's clerk know who's in the waiting room, and they know who to let in.
And in fact, and Judge Yost, I think, will insist that people come in and change their name immediately, right, Judge Yost? Oh, I think we lost her. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Don.
Yeah, when you're renaming yourself, don't make sure it's not a nickname like Frat Boy 2010 or something like that. Make sure it's appropriate. And your client's device needs to be properly named as well. And remind your client not to put the phone up to their ear when the webcam is on. I just heard that from a judge today. I asked her if she could see to the other side of the client's cranium, but she said it was a rather gross thing to see. And if if you fail to rename your device, you're probably going to be the last one called if you're in a cattle call kind of a situation. So make sure that gets done. And your background's important too. I mean, look, behind me. I don't have, I'm trying not to, these lights are really bright, but the background needs to be appropriate. We can't do virtual in a trial setting. Now, Scott, I know you can probably do that in an appellate setting, but in the trial setting, we're not allowed to have a virtual background because the judge needs to have confidence that no one is behind coaching or, or doing something inappropriate for that person who's appearing. And so when you are doing your background, think of it as scenery. Think of it like you're setting the stage at a theater. You want to set an appropriate background. And what upstage is what's behind you. Don't let what's upstage upend your argument. That's kind of the advice there. Don't Zoom from your bed. I heard that from a judge already today. And don't obviously put your well-stocked bar or wine cellar behind you. That is not a good impression to make for the judge. Lighting, don't be backlit. Don't be in front of a window. Don't be where the light is directly behind your head. And I'm having a hard time with these LED tubes they put in, and I have a rather substantial forehead, so I beam light that way, but I'm working on that still. Remember, you can make all different kinds of choices with lamps and light bulbs too. And then costuming and makeup, just like in the theater, you need to wear the appropriate costume. So yes, you can be all business from top and potentially not on the bottom. I don't recommend that, because inevitably the day that you do that is the day that the dog's going to do something stupid or the kids are going to do something that distracts you, and you get up and make a reveal you didn't want to do. So if you're going to be in a suit, be in a suit. That's important. If you're going to be in a dress, be in a dress. Make it, it's as if you're going to court, because you are. If you wouldn't wear it to court, don't appear in it in Zoom. Same thing for your clients. And then let's see here. Try not to disappear into your background too. Before we got on the full throttle on this Zoominar, I was trying to see if I could go with different lighting. Mm-hmm. And when I opened up my drape to let the sun come in, I disappeared because I'm wearing navy blue into my navy blue background. So don't let that happen to you.
I noticed several people here today have virtual backgrounds, but I actually wanted to ask John Cece a question because his virtual background is customized. John, do you mind telling us how you did that?
Sure, no problem. It's Adobe Spark, a program you can get online, or I guess a service you can access online through Adobe, the same company that, the Acrobat Reader that creates PDFs that most of us use. They were offering a 2-month free trial, so I was using it for other things. And then basically I just went in and created a big black square. And then I added my logo to it. And they have 2 options with that. You can just drop your logo in as a background, which would have put it all the way behind, or you can have it freeform, which lets you put it wherever you want. So I just did it 3 or 4 times until it fit in a spot where it looked good. And then I downloaded it as, I think, a JPEG or maybe a PNG file, and then uploaded it to Zoom as a virtual background.
Hey, John, can you put that in the chat too so people know how to find it?
You mean Adobe Spark? Just mention that? Okay.
Yeah. And I'm going back to Don, you were talking about lighting. I had somebody email me after a presentation and they were making recommendations that was really beyond my technological capabilities. But one of the things they were recommending, Don, was to have an overhead light of some sort. I mean, I can tell that you don't have an overhead light. I just didn't have any way of assembling that for my office. Any comments, more comments on lighting?
Just the final thing I had before we get on to the paperless office stuff that we were talking about is, remember, you are directing your client's presentation too. The judge is going to base what you present on how you present your client as well. Just like you would tell them to wear their Sunday best to court, tell them to wear their Sunday best to the Zoom hearing. And make sure that, again, the device is properly named, their background is appropriate, their lighting is good, and test with them well before the hearing to try to iron out any rough spots.
Bill Berlin, you asked a question about trial courts not allowing virtual backgrounds. I think that is correct. So you could use your virtual background if you're in a webinar or at the Court of Appeals, for example. They don't have a problem with the virtual backgrounds. But you're right, if you are in the trial court, most of them, I think, are not allowing virtual backgrounds. So you'll just have to clean up your office, basically. Melissa, did you have anything to add before we move to paperless office? Did you have anything to add about Zoom hearings?
No, not really. The only thing I was going to follow up on with what Scott said, I sort of got lucky with my webcam. As he mentioned, I do use a Surface tablet. I really love it because it weighs between 1 pound and 2 pound. And I had 5 years worth of all of my client files electronically stored in it before I started to run into any storage issues. So I like that I can carry something that's less than 2 pounds into court with me. And I have every file I could ever imagine, and copies of statutes and rules of evidence, and it's all right there to download it onto my device, and I can use it on an airplane and do all kinds of work on it. One thing I wanted to follow up on what Scott said though, is that generally with the Surface tablets, the Pro version will get you the Windows 10 professional or business version of it. And especially if we are moving toward maintaining our client files on our computers, it's more and more important to make sure that that's being stored on a secure device. And I think that the Windows 10 for business, if you're operating a business from your computer, is more and more essential. I think sometimes people think they can go to Best Buy and buy a computer there, but you're probably going to be getting the version of Windows that is the home version that's not as secure as the business version.
So
And
Melissa,
Lisa, if I can just
yeah, go
elaborate
ahead.
on that a little bit. So what you're looking for is Windows 10 Pro instead of Windows 10 Home. And Melissa's right. If you go to Best Buy or Staples or someplace like that and you buy a laptop, it's probably going to come with Windows 10 Home. That doesn't mean you shouldn't buy it, but it does mean that one of the first things you should do is spend the $100 when you are setting up the laptop. Go to the Microsoft Store. It's one of the apps that comes on Windows 10, and you can then do an in-place upgrade from Windows 10 Home to Windows 10 Pro. It's painless. It doesn't take long. Last time I did it, I think it was a 10 or 15-minute upgrade. And it's definitely worth doing because one of the things you get is full disk encryption. Microsoft's version of full disk encryption is called BitLocker. And I would be really afraid to carry around a laptop with confidential client data on it on a laptop that was running Windows 10 Home because it does not have full disk encryption.
I had a question for Melissa. You had mentioned you had your Surface Pro, and I have one too, and I really like it. But you said you had 5 years worth of client files on it. Were those backed up on the cloud?
Yes, and there's
Okay.
yeah, I think as we kind of move into paperless office, I don't know if you're ready to kind of make that transition
Yes,
now.
we are. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So it's a good transition there. So one thing I always kind of think about, kind of that bigger picture overview when you're talking about, how do we work in a pandemic or how do we work remotely, is making sure that you can get access to all of your things without having to physically go to the office. In case there's a pandemic, in case there's a fire in your office, all sorts of things could happen that could enable you not to be able to access those documents. So
no electricity.
Right. So what I personally like to do is I have an ultra portable device that I have all of my client data downloaded onto the device, and it all backs up to the cloud. And there are different ways you can do that. I know Scott is a big fan of OneDrive. I happen to use Citrix ShareFile. There's Dropbox and Box, which are not my favorites. I happen to really like Citrix ShareFile, but sometimes it's more what you're accustomed to and what features you're looking for. But it is important that all of that data gets backed up. So if you do have something, I did on one of my devices one time have a catastrophic fail, all of your data is there and you don't need to worry about it. And it was pretty painless for me to just go and get all of my data, even though one of my devices died on me. So it is important to make sure you've got that data backed up somewhere.
Let's talk about, so there's a lot of different aspects to having a paperless office, and my office has been paperless since, I would say mostly paperless since 2009. That's when the Court of Appeals started to allow us to e-file voluntarily. And of course we immediately jumped on that bandwagon and e-file everything ever since then. So we still print things once in a while, but for the most part we scan everything in. So speaking of scanning, what kind of scanning equipment are you recommending to have a paperless office? Because we still do receive things on paper in the mail, unfortunately, from some people.
Well, yeah, I'm the dinosaur here among these four. My office is still a lot of paper, partly because I do bankruptcy work, which even though I have to file electronically, I have to hold on to a physical copy of the petition and schedules and all those documents for 6 years. But I scan everything in anyway in order to send it to the trustees. And for years, I've been just using a Brother multifunction machine. It's got a great scanner on it. It can scan higher resolution than just 300, but 300 is what Scott recommended, and says that's the right size for the file size. And because it's multifunction, it can, yes, indeed, still fax, Scott. Scott hates that.
I hate fax. Fax is a horrible technology. The go-to scanner for years really has been the ScanSnap series from Fujitsu. And, you know, they've gone through a number of iterations, and it's what I used for years until my, you know, probably 15-year-old ScanSnap finally died back in November. And I ended up buying a Canon instead, simply because I wanted something that was a multifunction device like Don uses. And mine is a color laser printer along with being a scanner and a fax machine, but I will never ever use the fax function because it's a horrible technology. But let me just suggest that it used to be in the legal tech world, they would say you never got fired for recommending HP, but I do think there are probably better choices. You know, I did my own evaluation, got a Canon, but Brother makes exceptionally reliable and affordable multifunction devices. In addition to my ScanSnap that I had for 15 years, for about 15 years, I had one of the Brother multifunction machines. You can tell what they are by looking at the model numbers. Anything that starts with MFC is a Brother multifunction machine. And they do a great job. They're incredibly reliable. The consumables are very inexpensive. And when it comes to buying toner, so that's something you should look for. If you do a lot of scanning, I would get a standalone scanner like a ScanSnap. If you're not doing a lot of scanning, and I don't do a lot of scanning anymore because I punish my clients if they send me paper.
Wait, how do you punish them? I want to hear more.
I charge them my full $3.25 an hour to scan those darn things in. And I tell them in advance. I say, look, you can take it to Staples or somewhere else and have it scanned in, you know, for a lot less than I'm going to charge you. And, you know, if a client's going to be in big trouble with me if I get a banker's box of papers dropped on my doorstep by FedEx.
Good for you.
Yep.
And what if the trial attorney does that?
I urge the trial attorney to take it to a copy service and have it copied and upload the images to my Dropbox.
Maybe I'm just not as stern with my clients. I feel like I do still get a fair amount of paper from both from other attorneys and from clients. So I do feel like I do quite a bit of scanning, but I'm able to do mine just in a multifunction device. I happen to use the Xerox. I think I went with a low-end Canon and it wasn't so good. So I went with a Xerox one that's been a little bit better. I similarly had issues with an HP one that was not a great scanner, but I've been really happy with the Xerox all-in-ones.
We still have court reporters that refuse to email us transcripts, so we sometimes will have to scan transcripts. Yes. And just really quickly, speaking of faxes, we got rid of our fax line because we had a dedicated, hardwired fax line for years. And when we moved to our new building a couple years ago, we don't really need that anymore. We never use it. I think we're paying a monthly subscription, which is kind of a shame because it's hardly ever used, but it's eFax. And I think there is a free service. And maybe we should switch to that because, I mean, if we use it I don't even think we use it like 5 to 10 times a year. So it seems kind of silly, but there's once in a while we'll get into a situation where somebody, usually the court system, like the only way they can do it is, by mail or by fax. And if you don't want to wait around for the mail to eventually arrive, you just have no choice but to work with the fax, eFax.
Yeah, Lisa, I've been using eFax since I think 1992, which was probably when they were first founded. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what I pay, probably $120 a year or something like that.
That sounds about right.
For the service, but it is handy in those rare times when you need to send or receive fax. We still deal with insurance companies, banks, healthcare providers who are incapable for some reason of accepting email. And you have to fax things to them. So having some ability to do that still makes sense, but doing it over the internet makes a lot more sense than having a fax machine.
So now that a lot of courts are moving to e-filing, and some of them are, obviously just Wayne County, for example, is just having to figure this out for the first time in the middle of a pandemic and doing it without any assistance from the state of Michigan. But nonetheless, it's happening in a lot of places around the state. One of the things that I think a lot of people might have questions about is, once you scan the document, what do you do with it? Let's talk a little bit about the PDFs. Portable, what is portable?
Portable document format,
such as Adobe. And we can talk a little bit about the different things that you can do with the document to make it more amenable to e-filing or filing by email, as the case may be in some counties now.
All right, who wants to start with that one?
Well, Even before we get started on that one thing that I would add is I think it really starts when you're scanning those documents. So you want to make sure you've got the right scanner, but you want to make sure you're scanning them in the right way. And I think that's where sometimes people kind of fall short a little bit. So Don briefly mentioned scanning at 300 DPI. That's what I scan my documents in at. I also scan them in as black and white because it's very rare that you need color. You know, if you do get a photo that's in color, obviously you want to adjust your scanner settings, but I have my scanner set to do black and white 300 DPI, and it maximizes the readability of the file while minimizing the file size so that you can have lots of files stored on your document, and it doesn't take, 30 seconds to open a document. It just opens very quickly.
Right. The only things that you should be scanning in color are those things where the color makes a difference. If you have an exhibit that is a photograph, then by all means, if it's a color photograph, scan it in color. And the only things that should be scanned in grayscale are the things where that would make a difference, like a black and white photograph. If you're scanning documents, you definitely want to scan in black and white. Some people think, oh, well, why not do grayscale? If you've ever scanned the same document in both black and white and grayscale and compared the two, the grayscale will be it won't be as dark, the printing won't be as dark, and it'll be all fuzzy around the edges, all the lettering, all the characters. So if it's a black and white document, make sure you set your scanner to scan in black and white, not color and not grayscale.
So for a second, since we're talking about scanning documents and using it in conjunction with the Adobe, can we talk about the OCR function that can be used at the same time as you're scanning the document? And first of all, Scott, tell them what OCR is.
Yeah, OCR, optical character recognition. Although if you're using Adobe Acrobat, what it will be called is recognized text. Actually, let me share my screen for a second to show you that. This is just a transcript in one of my appeals, unfortunately one that I lost, but it's a public record document, so don't worry that you're seeing people's names. But up here under Tools in Adobe Acrobat.
But we can't see your document.
We're not seeing it? Oh, okay. Let me get it shared here again.
You're still the host, so you should be able to share it.
I should be able to. Okay. Bingo. Now we got it.
There we go.
Okay. So up here in the Tools toolbar, Adobe calls it Recognize Text. It's down here. So if you want to recognize text in a sense and do the OCR, you would click in this file and it will just go about doing its business. Now, the great thing about being able to do this in Adobe is you can do it in multiple files at one time. So you can click multiple files and then you can add files or you can add entire folders. So here I can pick anything in my OneDrive, like anything in all my case files, and I could come down and pick the other one, which is the transcripts, and I can do OCR on every single transcript that I have in this folder, which would be transcripts.
That's a game changer, Scott.
What's that?
That's a game changer, Scott.
It helps. So now, anyway, that's one of the things you can do.
But you also had a specific recommendation about, because it does slow down your computer if you're scanning and OCRing at the same time. So can you share your specific recommendation?
I'm going to stop sharing for a second. And what you can do with this is your computer will slow down when you're doing OCR on multiple documents. Computer, that's one thing, and that's fine if you can. But a lot of us, when we're working remotely, are working with just one computer, one laptop, one desktop, whatever it happens to be. So what I do is at the end of the day, I will set this up to, sometimes I will have it scan documents, even thousands of documents at one time. I'll put them all in multiple folders and I'll go through and I'll have it recognize text in all those folders. And I'll just let it go and I'll walk away and let it run all night if it has to. And when I come back in the morning, it's done the OCR. So that can be very helpful because without OCR, all you have is an image. It's like a photograph of the document. You can't do full text search. There's a lot of things that you can't do. One of the things I should mention too, I want to go back, let me share this one again and just give you an idea of some of the things you can do. Okay, sharing it again. And I think we're all familiar with kind of Control F being the universal search window. You can see the search window popped up on the top right. Don't just be satisfied with that, because you can search multiple documents this way by opening full Acrobat search, and you can then search then all documents in a particular location. So in this case, if I wanted to search all of the transcripts in this particular file, this case, some of you may have read about this case because it was discussed on the listserv. I can search for all of the instances of alienation because it was a parental alienation case. And here we go. Every time it comes up in all of the transcripts, and these are all hyperlinks. If I click on it, it'll take me right to that spot in the transcript.
Wow.
In each volume. So it's a great way to, when you're doing appellate work and you're putting together a statement of facts, this is really an essential thing to be able to do.
Or I could see if you're doing, you have to do findings of facts or conclusions of law for the trial judge after your trial. So now we know Scott's secret to having such good briefs. He does say it again, Adobe full, what was it again?
Adobe Full Acrobat Search is what it's called.
Adobe Full Acrobat Search. We're going to put that on our cheat sheet too.
Yeah. And you just get to it by, in any document, all you have to do is hit Control F. That works on websites too. I mean, you know, if you're on, for example, I'm an ICL partner. I'm sure that a lot of us on this webinar are. And if you actually open up a chapter in the ICL book and you're looking for the specific words that you need to find in a chapter, they're otherwise hard to find. But in any web browser, you hit Control F and type in your search term, and it'll take you right to that point in the chapter where that term comes up.
So we had somebody ask about how accurate is the OCR program. Does anybody have feedback on that?
You know, it's going to depend on how high quality the scan was. If it's a document that was created directly from Word or WordPerfect into a PDF file instead of scanned, then it's going to be highly accurate. If you're taking paper and you're scanning it in, you know, that depends on the quality of the original. The OCR is pretty good, but it's not going to be perfect, and it'll miss some instances of some words.
And it tends to mix up ones and L's occasionally, I've noticed.
Yep.
That look very similar because, as Scott said, it looks at it like an image, and then it takes that image and converts it over to text. But just to follow up on one thing that Scott said, if you can take that native document, that native Word document, and instead of printing it in paper and scanning it, you can go into your file function and choose print, and print to PDF works in pretty much any program. If you do have a paid version of the Adobe Acrobat program, there's a plugin so you can directly convert documents, which is what I tend to do. So I take a Word document and use the Adobe plugin and convert it into a document, and then it's going straight from text to text, and you don't have to OCR it, and you can still search that text and it will all be recognized without having those OCR errors.
So two comments. One, when somebody prints out things that you have to scan, doesn't that make the file size a lot bigger, which is a problem when you're e-filing?
Yes. And one of the things that you can do is Adobe has a built-in function to reduce the file size. Let me just go back to that same document again and share it and show you where that is. It's up here in the file dialog. The drop down, you go to File, Save As. The second item is Reduce Size PDF. I've actually had, and if you click on that, it'll ask you if you want to retain the existing compatibility versions. I think mine are compatible back to Acrobat 9. And then if you click OK, it'll go through and shrink the file size. So that can be one way to shrink it to make it possible to e-file. I have also found that running the document through the OCR process, the recognized text document process, actually can shrink the file size as well. That might sound counterintuitive, but it seems to work for me, and that way you can avoid having to, you know, chop the document in half, which is what you might have to do if it's larger than the 25 megabyte per file that the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court allow for e-filing.
Jim Chrysicos had a question about alternatives to Adobe Acrobat, and I think he mentioned that the Dells come with a different program called Foxit. I'm not familiar with that. The real question is, does he need to go out and buy Adobe Acrobat because it's just a superior product, or will these other, not versions, but these other programs do what we need them to do, just like Adobe?
Yeah, they generally will if you upgrade to the Pro version. Foxit Phantom has a Pro version. Kofax, which bought the PDF program from Nuance, is another good program to get, but always make sure you get the Pro version. Even with Adobe Acrobat, don't try to get by with just Adobe Acrobat Standard. You're going to need Adobe Acrobat Pro, and these days it's DC Pro or Document Cloud Pro because everything's by subscription. But if you want to actually own your own PDF editing program, you're going to have to go with one of the alternatives, which would be something like Foxit or Nitro Pro or the Kofax program. They're all going to run you around $150 to $180 per license for the Pro version. What Pro versions give you is the ability to redact. We've seen these hilarious situations where lawyers have gotten into ethical hot water because they have e-filed documents thinking that they had redacted things like social security numbers and other confidential information, when all they had done is put black bars over them, and the information was still there simply by highlighting it with the mouse and then pasting it onto a blank sheet of paper. So just putting a black bar over it does not redact anything. And we've had a number of cases, federal court and state court, where lawyers have been sanctioned because they failed to use redaction appropriately. And you can only redact appropriately in the professional versions of these PDF programs.
Now, I've noticed when I use the official redacting function of Adobe, it made my file size really, really big. Do you know if there's a way to, I don't know why that would be, but do you know what to do about that?
I haven't had that happen on mine, but I would say once you redact, then run it through the file save as reduced size PDF function again and see if that brings it back to normal.
Okay. I want to make sure we had time to go over e-notarization, since it's a brand new thing that has come about during the pandemic, and Don Wheaton has been e-notarizing, so he's going to give us some.
And we have a poll.
Oh, good. Yeah. Scott, you're in charge of the poll now.
Okay. So let's launch the poll.
I just answered your poll, Scott, but how much longer we're going to have this, we don't know. But right now, the current order is set to expire on June 30th. So we'll see. I have a feeling it's going to get extended because the original order was 2020-41, and then when they extended it in Executive Order 2020-74, they gave us a couple of bonuses there. First of all, they increased the time frame by which you get the document back from 24 hours to 72, and they also added a paragraph in that second order suspending the strict compliance with the Michigan Law and Notarial Act. So we got a little bit of a pass there. How much longer? Like I said, I don't know what we're going to be able to do. But the steps you have to take, I mean, it's really not as difficult as some people might like to think it is. But you have to have audio-visual technology that allows the direct interaction between you and the signer and any witness. So, can you use Zoom? Yes. Can you use Skype? Yes. Can you use FaceTime? Anything that gives you the audio-visual interaction. But the caveat on that is you have to be able to record the meeting. So Zoom is a perfect platform to use for this. You have to create that audio and visual recording of the notarization, and so you have to let the signer and any witnesses know that you're doing that. You just let them know you are recording this. Then you make sure to hit that record button, because if you don't, you got to go back and do it again. And then you introduce yourself and your signer and any witnesses to each other, just like you would if you were sitting in your office around the conference table. And you confirm that everyone who's on the conference can see and hear each other. These all sound very no-brainers, but you really need to do that. The signer has to show you on camera some satisfactory evidence of their identity. So in other words, they have to produce that driver's license, passport, whatever, put it right up to the camera so you can see all the information and take it down if you need to. You have to ask the signer to confirm that they are physically located in the state of Michigan, because if they're not, then well, first, if you're in Monroe and the signer's in Marquette, that's okay. You're still in Michigan. Everybody's in Michigan. It's all good. But if the signer isn't in Michigan, the document has to relate to a matter that's going before a court a governmental entity, a public official, or an entity in Michigan, or the document has to involve property in Michigan. And the signer has to put their signature on the document in a way that makes any future changes or modifications of that signature evident. In other words, ink, hello.
Blood. Just kidding. Hey, I have a question, Don.
Yeah.
When the person's actually signing, do they have to move do they have to go like this and like actually watch them signing the document, or is it just enough that, hey, I'm signing the document, here I go?
You
What do you need?
absolutely have to see them sign it. So they,
Okay.
and I have had the clients, they've turned their laptops,
Okay.
they've taken their phones, you know, and signed the document so that you can see them sign. And like I said, at first, the signer has to send the document back to you immediately. So within 24 to 72 hours, it's just as simple, they can send it to you by email. As long as you've watched them sign it, and what you get back is what was signed, you can then notarize the document. Because once you get that document back, that's when you notarize the document. And you have to put, I'm air quoting this because this is the actual thing you have to put in, notarized using electronic/remote technology under the notary block. And then you have to keep a journal of each transaction you conduct. You got to keep the name and address of the signer, the date of the notarization, the type of document you're notarizing, what identification was provided, and the program you used to conduct this conference. And then you have to keep that recording for 10 years that you made when you're notarizing a document like this. So what way you choose to do that is up to you, but as we referenced earlier, it's probably better not to save it on your computer. It's probably better to save it to the cloud, because if your computer crashes and your hard drive goes with it, you've just lost that record that you were supposed to maintain for 10 years. And then you don't have to remember all this stuff either. You don't have to take notes, because ICL has an absolutely magnificent checklist for this. Attorney Nathan, and I'm going to butcher his last name, Piwowarski, put it together. It's very comprehensive. You can download it from ICL, and I would recommend it highly if you're going to notarize a document electronically that you do download that checklist. And right now, a bill is pending in the legislature to give us a savings clause regarding these remote notarizations, because there are some who are challenging whether these are going to hold up in the long run. But the probate and estate planning section is working with its lobbyists to try to get that legislation passed. So
How many have you done, Don?
I've done about 3.
Okay.
I mean, it's not, most of what I have notarized has been the verification on a complaint. So there's not going to be too many challenges to that kind of thing. The challenge is going to come in if in the future somebody has signed, you know, a power of attorney or a will or something like that. That's where I foresee those challenges coming in, and that's why the probate and estate planning section is all over that.
Well, they were actively involved in getting the remote notary enacted. Well, I don't want to say enacted because it's by executive order. So, so prediction, do we have a prediction as to whether the legislature will make changes to the existing statute to incorporate some sort of form of e-notary going in the future, or do you think this is just really just a temporary thing to get us through the pandemic by executive order?
It's a toss-up, but I got to believe, just like Zoom hearings, the genie is out of the bottle. And I have a feeling we're going to get this to be able to do this, and it's going to benefit our clients and us in the long run.
Well, it certainly will make it easier to get a notarization of a client who is not anywhere near your county. So like the example you gave is perfect, Macomb and Marquette, pretty big distance. So thank you, Don. Now, one of the things we wanted to talk about with the paperless office, but I thought it fell kind of directly with the notary, well, not directly with the notary, but sort of related, the e-signature, which we cannot use for notary. But one of the things that Scott Bassett has taught my staff how to do is to have an electronic signature that actually looks like my signature, rather than just doing the S/S and then typing my name. Like with the electronic filings, we have to write our name out, but it can be S/S and then type name, which is doesn't look as good as when you have what looks like a physical signature. So Scott, do you mind addressing that really briefly?
Yeah, actually, I wouldn't be signing a transcript, but of course, this is what's up on screen right now. Acrobat has a sign and certify section in the tools, and you can place your signature or sign your document anywhere you want. If I were going to sign this transcript someplace, I could just click place signature and then come down here somewhere on the bottom and drop my signature in. And you see, I have a number of different signatures, but this particular one is just a standard appearance signature, just has a scanned in copy of my standard signature. So I would just click sign, and then I would save this document again. And if I save it like this, what'll happen is you'll see the signature appear at the bottom of the document, just like
Oh,
that.
wow. And then
So
why do you have different signatures?
well, I've set them up for different people in the family, actually.
Okay.
So let me unshare this.
I didn't know if you had a different signature for filing an appearance versus filing a brief, or
Actually, I do have a few. That signature is very basic. I like the appearance of it because it's just a signature. It looks like what you would sign onto a document. But I've got other signatures that have more features on them where it'll show, date signed, the particular Adobe verification that I use for the signature. All of that can be on there. So you can have a more elaborate signature beyond just the script if you want to.
Okay. And then one other question that we had talked about when we were planning is Scott brought up the mechanical keyboard. And I don't know that's really having a paperless office, but one of the things we talked about was, and I don't know what kind of keyboard you're at right now. Melissa, are you on your Surface Pro?
I'm on my Surface Pro. I think, keyboards are a bit of personal preference sometimes. I like the laptop style keyboards that have the scissor switch mechanism in it, which is a lower profile and you don't need to hit as hard. So I can type a lot faster when you're doing that. So as part of my practice, when I switched over to paperless offices, I stopped handwriting notes when I was talking to my clients on my phone like this before I got my headset. So now I can have my headset and I can type notes. And because the boom is right near my voice, they can't hear me when I'm typing, as opposed to if you're trying to do something, this wouldn't happen so much over the phone unless you've got like a voice over IP and you're taking calls on your computer. But if the microphone that you're using is closer to your keyboard than your mouth, that's what the person you're talking to is going to be hearing.
Yeah, everybody's been on phone calls or whatever, and you're having a conversation with a client or another attorney, and then you hear this clickety clackety sound and you're like, hey, they're not listening to me, they're typing. So you were, Scott, I think, telling us about some people like that keyboard that makes that clickety clack sound.
Yeah.
But then
I got introduced to these types of keyboards with the old IBM Model M keyboard, which was extremely loud and extremely big. It probably weighed 30 pounds and it took up your entire desk. But I love that keyboard. I still have 2 of them in a closet right now, but they are just too loud to use if I'm going to be on the phone. But I still think mechanical keyboards are a lot better to type on. A lot of us during the pandemic have had to get by without a staff. Well, I've never had a staff, so I've always gotten by doing all my own typing. But for a lot of people, it's new, relying entirely upon their own typing skills. So you want to be able to use a keyboard that actually is easy to type on. And mechanical keyboards are so much better than the cheap keyboards that come with most computers. And most laptops don't have great keyboards, although some of the newer ones do. I mean, the Lenovo ThinkPad series has always been known for its excellent keyboards. The keyboards in the Dell XPS series are excellent. The keyboards in the HP, some of the newer ones like the EliteBook series and the Spectre X360 series are excellent. And the keyboards on all the Microsoft Surface devices are very good. So all of those are good keyboards to type on. But if you're at a desktop computer, don't saddle yourself with the problem of the keyboard that came with your computer. Buy something better. And most of the mechanical keyboards come with switches from this company called Cherry, just like the fruit, and they're called Cherry MX switches, and they're all assigned different colors, and the different colors will tell you how clicky or loud it is and how much of a tactile response that it has. So you can try out different options. That's getting a little geeky, I understand, but it can make a big difference in your typing speed and comfort.
And one of the things that I've noticed, I held up my very ancient Wave keyboard, but I can't type with both of my wrists together like this. And my hands like this. I have to have them at more of a natural positioning. So like Melissa said, get what works for you, because that's the most important thing. But I find that by having my hands in a more natural position, I reduce fatigue, and reduce the chance of carpal tunnel in the future.
Now, I know technically we're out of time, but I had one more question that I didn't even warn you about. People used to use Dragon Speak, I think, software to do dictation. What's the preferred type of method for doing the dictation if you wanted to put something right into your computer without having to involve a secretary or a little recording device, which I still have, but don't use?
Wow, that depends upon how sophisticated you want to get. The only really good third-party voice or speech recognition software is Dragon Naturally Speaking. But it's good. You want to make sure that you don't get the basic, home version of it. You want to take the step up where you can customize the vocabulary and have it search through your brief bank or your documents to learn the words that you use. And when you do that, it works very well, as long as you use a good microphone with it as well, a good USB microphone. Recognition can be very high. But if you're not interested in putting that much effort into it, you can always use the dictation feature that's built into Microsoft Windows and also to Word. There is, if you open any recent version of Word and you've enabled the voice dictation, you will find up in the ribbon, which is what we used to call a toolbar, now it's called a ribbon, you will find the dictate option powered by Microsoft Speech Services. And if you click on that, you will be able to dictate reasonably well. And you can pick different languages, of course. Obviously, I'm picking English United States. And you can then dictate directly into your document. It does a credible job. It's not a final version. You're still going to have to go through and do your proofreading, but that would be a way to start. If you think you like doing it, then I would take a step up to Dragon Naturally Speaking.
Scott, thank you. I'm going to have to try that out in the very near future. I wanted to thank all of our panelists, Melissa, Don, and Scott, for joining us today. This has been so helpful, and I'm definitely in 2 or 3 areas going to be a game changer for us. And so everybody keep an eye out for the list that I will be circulating to our panelists to get the best input about recommendations and with links and whatnot, so that we can all do our own investigation of the different equipment that we've talked about today. So once again, thank you everybody. And Scott, you are the host still, so you're going to have to turn off the recording because I can't do it. Thank you everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, Lisa.